Once there was a girl who was as good as she was beautiful. She lived with her stepmother and two stepsisters. They were cruel to her because she was more beautiful than they were. They made her scrub and clean all day long and gave her only rags to wear. At night, she slept in the chimney corner because she was always covered with ashes. They called her Cinderella or Cinderella. One day, the king's son announced that he was going to give a ball. Cinderella's two stepsisters were invited. You can fix our hair for us, they said to Cinderella. She fixed their hair in different ways and did her best to make them look beautiful. But no matter how hard she tried, Cinderella still looked more beautiful than they, even in her rags. This made the stepsisters angry. Why don't you go to the ball too, Cinderella? They asked. The poor girl looked down at her rags and said, how I wish I could go. Then they laughed at her and said, imagine a Cinderella at the prince's ball. With tears in her eyes, Cinderella watched her stepsisters get into their coach and depart for the ball. Just the same, I wish I could go, she whispered to herself. At that very moment, she heard a voice behind her saying, and so you shall, my child. Cinderella turned around and there stood a lovely lady with a crown on her head. I am your fairy godmother, she said, and I shall prepare you for the prince's ball. First, run into the garden and get me the biggest pumpkin you can find. Cinderella ran into the garden and brought back the pumpkin. The fairy waved her wand over the pumpkin. It was changed instantly into a splendid red coach with gold trimmings. Now we need 6 horses, said the fairy godmother. Run and fetch the mouse trap. Cinderella brought the mouse trap. There were 6 lively little mice in the trap. The fairy waved her wand and the mice became 6 prancing white horses with tassels on their heads. We need footmen too, said the fairy. 6 will do. Run and fetch 6 green lizards. Cinderella brought the lizards. The fairy waved her wand and immediately there were 6 footmen dressed in purple livery trimmed with gold. But my clothes, said Cinderella, looking down at her rags. The fairy godmother laughed gently and touched Cinderella with her wand. Cinderella's rags fell off and she was dressed in a magnificent ball gown of golden silk. There were diamonds in her hair and on her feet twinkled 2 lovely little glass slippers. And now off to the ball. said the fairy. But you must remember that the magic ends at midnight. You must be home at 12 o'clock, or you will find yourself again in rags. When Cinderella arrived at the ball, everyone whispered, "What a beautiful princess! I wonder who she is." Even the two stepsisters did not recognize Cinderella, but they were envious. The prince dances with no one but her. They said to each other, "Indeed, Cinderella and the prince were the handsomest couple on the dance floor." And the prince never left Cinderella's side. Cinderella was so happy that she quite forgot about the time. Suddenly she heard the clock strike the first note of 12 midnight. Quickly she courtesied to the prince and then fled from the room and out of the castle. Just as she was about to step into the coach, the last note of 12 sounded. The coach vanished before her eyes, and there on the ground lay a pumpkin. The mice scurried off, and the lizards crawled away in the dust. Cinderella stood there, dressed in rags again. The lovely little glass slippers were all that remained, but Cinderella had lost one of the slippers on the marble steps when she hurried down. She limped home on the other slipper and reached the chimney corner before her stepsisters returned. The next morning, everyone was awakened by the sound of a bugle. A messenger from the palace called out the news that the prince had found the glass slipper. He was going to take it to every house in the kingdom until he found its owner. When he found the girl, she would become his bride. All the young ladies in the kingdom were excited. They hurried to put on their best dresses for the prince's visit. But Cinderella had nothing to wear but her rags. The prince went to every house looking for the beautiful girl. At last, he came to Cinderella's house. Cinderella's stepsisters pushed her aside in their hurry to try on the slipper. "I think it will fit me," said the older girl, but she could not even squeeze her toes into the tiny slipper. The younger stepsister had no better luck when she tried the slipper on. "Let me try," said Cinderella in a shy little voice. "You!" cried the stepsisters. "Go back to your cinders and ashes, where you belong." But the prince looked for a long time at Cinderella's lovely face. He knew he had seen that face before. "Let her try," said the prince. Cinderella slipped her foot into the glass slipper easily. Then, to everyone's amazement, she drew the other slipper out of her pocket and put it on her other foot. At the moment, the fairy godmother appeared and with her wand touched Cinderella. There she stood, dressed again in the splendid ball gown. The prince gazed at her with joy and then knelt down at her feet. He said, "This is my own true bride." A great wedding was held. Cinderella was so happy that she forgave her stepsisters. She took them to live with her at the palace, where they married two lords, and Cinderella and the prince lived happily ever after.